recorded at Get a Grip Studios in Toronto, Canada, a Get a Grip management production and in association with the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Financially supported by the good folks at the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, this is Restoring Darkness podcast.
This episode of Restoring Darkness is brought to you by Evluma. If you're serious about contributing to the reduction of light pollution, go to evluma.com, hover over products, and click on Dark Sky Friendly Lighting. Both the OmniMax and AreaMax lights are International Dark Sky Association certified. The warmer color temperatures of the OmniMax reduce the more easily scattered blue wavelengths, which contribute to glare and sky glow. With AreaMax lights, you get full cutoff, which also means no uplight and a significantly reduced contribution to sky glow. And all of Evluma's outdoor lighting product lines come with dimmable drivers for even more control. If your customer is looking for dark sky-friendly fixtures with energy savings while still meeting the demands of decorative lighting, look no further than Evluma. Evluma, illuminating the pursuit of dark skies.
Welcome back, folks, to the Restoring Darkness podcast. On today's show, I have Yana Yakushina. But before we get to her bio and all that, I got to tell you about the amazing new Restoring Darkness merch we have. That's right. I bought a whole whack of it, and my kids came into the office, and they took it all. That's how badass it all is. So go to restoringdarkness.com, click the little merch button, and you can get T-shirts, sweaters, hats, all sorts of stuff with the great merchandise of the podcast there, and wear it with pride. That's right. Yana Yakushina is a practicing lawyer and researcher in the field of environmental and space law. That's interesting. Currently, Yana is working on her Ph.D. thesis on the legal recognition of light pollution as an environmental problem at the University of Ghent in Belgium. I love that. The goal of the research is to incorporate scientific findings on the negative effects of artificial light at night into legal practice to reduce light pollution. Moreover, Yana is a Deputy Director of Legal Research and Special Projects at the Space Court Foundation, who ensures and endeavors the development, promotion, and management of projects in the field of legal research on space activities. Furthermore, Yana is a chair of sustainability at the Rule of Law Association, who performs due diligence on environmental and sustainability matters for both public and private sectors. In addition, Yana has successfully participated and worked worldwide on comprehensive legal projects with Lomonosov, Moscow State University, I hope I pronounced that right, the University of Ghent, the Ministry of Culture of the Russian Federation, United Nations Organization, Space Court Foundation, and various international legal firms, as well as participated in different international conferences. And now we have her in person here on the Restoring Darkness podcast. Welcome to the show, Yana.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited.
It's our pleasure. So I want to get into first, right off the bat, I just want to go right into this idea. One of the major problems we have in this movement, and that's what we're calling it now because it seems to be growing in all sorts of different areas and in the academic space, in the lighting industry, and then with the IDA's work. And then also there seems to be a lot of in scientific study going on in Europe with relation to this problem. Why, though, has the public and the environmental movements not latched on to light pollution as part of the environmental movements, latched onto it as part of the basket of environmental problems, and then the public doesn't seem to be aware of it as an issue? Why is that?
Now we can already see the dark sky movement is moving to the, for example, international NGOs. Mm-hmm. And they started to get more aware about the light pollution problems. Like, for example, let's take the Convention of Migratory Species. They started to talk about the artificial light at night as a problem, and it should be mitigated to protect the migratory species.
Mm-hmm. I had a conversation with Ken Walczak yesterday, who's on the board of the IDA, and that podcast should be coming out before this one. And what we determined is that it's actually very difficult, if not impossible, to measure light pollution. So if you're working towards making it, working on this as a legal issue, how do you guys measure light pollution, or how are you measuring, or is it measurable?
My main goal to again increase the awareness about the light pollution and put like what I'm going to do is to use the already existing framework of environmental law. So we have like that we have to protect the environment, we have to decrease the pollutants, and we have to recognize, in my opinion, artificial light at night as a pollutant. So how to measure it, it's not my issue because it has to be developed by engineers and stuff. From the legal perspective, I just have to highlight that the light is a pollutant, and we have to pay attention, for example, when we do the environmental impact assessment of the future project. Like, for example, we have a construction going on, and we're checking already how many emissions of pollutants to the water or to the air are already there. We should also consider at the same time the artificial light at night there. So this is what I'm doing. So I cannot really say how we can measure the light because I'm trying to get into there, but it's not really my subject.
Hey, John, I'm going to bring it over to you here. I'm going to preface it, though, before you take off in that what the satellites that measure light pollution, okay, can't see above 3,500 Kelvin. So any outdoor light at night that's above 3,500 Kelvin will be invisible to the light pollution satellites that we currently have orbiting the Earth that are measuring it. So it measures HPS, but it won't measure LED because we know that most outdoor lights are 4,000 K or above. And the second thing is that they're trying to develop techniques right now where they launch balloons into the stratosphere and they have angled cameras so they can measure the difference between looking at light that's going straight down to the Earth, John, and looking at it from an angle to measure sky glow, as opposed to how bright a parking lot is or how much vertical light is coming off those fixtures or wall packs or whatever we're talking about. So can you believe it? In the year 2022, John, we cannot even measure light pollution at this time. It's unbelievable to me, actually.
Well, it's careless, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Somebody wasn't paying attention to the fact that the most efficient LEDs that are out there were cold white 6,500 Kelvin lamps, and they were the things that were coming onto the marketplace. So what are we using? We're using measuring equipment that's pre-LED. That's what it sounds like.
Well, it's calibrated to a Kelvin temperature. So when people are claiming that there's less light pollution, they're not seeing anything. I think Ken said 3,500 K. Or it's either 3,000 or 3,500 K. So it measures all the HPS light pollution, which is being eliminated right now and being replaced by LED, and it doesn't even see the LED light pollution. So I just wanted to throw that at you before you move into your questions for Yana.
Thanks for that, because I mean, this is not really an aside, but I'll take it as an aside. When we first saw LEDs coming into architecture, and we were looking at LEDs and we're going, they don't look as bright as we were expecting them to. The LED industry said to us, you're using the wrong kind of lux meter. They are actually brighter than what the meter will give you. I said, I'm not using a meter. I'm just looking at it and going, it's not as bright as that one over there. So here we are. We move into a place where we're trying to measure things with an industry that has already done a sort kind of a soft shoe shuffle to make sure that they don't believe that we can read it, to having instrumentation which is not set up to be able to read it. But Yana, I've always felt that one of the problems that we've got here is that who sees it as pollution? Who actually sees it as a problem? We know that the astronomers started this conversation because they realized that they were being fogged out by sky glow. And more recently, and there's a lot of work going on around that in the UK now with light pollution around bats and small mammals and insects. But apart from people like you and me who care about this thing, I don't think anybody sees it as a problem. And I think that's a huge issue. It was raised at the Roland conference a few months back that if no one sees it as pollution, how can it be pollution? So can I just start with that one? Because that seems to go to the core of everything that we're talking about.
Yeah, indeed, how we can mitigate or regulate something, it's not really considered as a pollution. But I think, yeah, indeed, the astronomers were the first guys who started to say that it's a problem, even in like from 1950s, when the first law actually was made in 1958. It was in Arizona, in the Flagstaff, I think. And nowadays, I think we can see the movement against the lights within the protectors of the environment. And here, from the perspective of CO2 emissions, so the perspective of the climate change, the protection of different types of biodiversity, like you mentioned, moths or birds or some specific, if it goes for Australia, for example, they protect migratory birds and turtles. Like it depends. The light pollution is a big problem for certain taxa. They will make regulations to protect. But I think this is the starting point. So we see that, like in Australia, they have the regulations on turtles and birds. In United Kingdom, I think you have a light pollution parliamentary group, which actually works on the light pollution regulations. Not related only for environmental protection, but as a broad scale, including the energy efficiency, which is nowadays very important, I think. Yeah, also like nowadays, I think in Germany recently, they switched off the public lights of the circuits of the public lights to save the energy. So we can see it's also from the perspective of the awareness of the energy crisis.
I think this is a really strange one, because usually you become aware of something that you go, this is bad. Air pollution is bad. Why is air pollution bad? Because it kills people. It makes people very sick, and you can see that they're lying there in hospitals. They're lying there at home on breathing equipment. With light pollution, it's almost as if we're approaching this almost in a stealthy way. We're coming at it from the side. Germany has turned its lights off because of energy, because of the problems with Russia. France turned its lights off 10 years ago, I think, for energy.
Yeah.
Not because of light pollution, not because we were throwing light into the sky, but because we were throwing energy into the sky. We were throwing carbon into the sky. So here we are, we talk about, Michael, we talk about restoring darkness, but what we're actually winning the argument on is saving energy, which is a very peculiar thing, because I know, Yana, you've mentioned the Jevons paradox in your work, and I'm a great fan of Jevons. I think that guy was absolutely on the nail with this. And my concern is that here we are. We've moved from HPS and metal halides, and we've moved into LEDs. And it's almost as if as soon as we say the energy problem, we've solved it again, we're just going to turn all the lights on again, because we're not winning the philosophical discussion that being able to see the naked sky at night is actually important to us as a species.
But unfortunately,
Go on.
But yeah, it's very romantic, and I understand what do you mean. But I think with the idea of law and the dark sky protection, or not law, but any other policy or regulations, and to make it work in the government, like to make them, I don't know, do something with the light pollution, we have to start from the energy efficiency, because then we will see the certain movement from the government level. And then we should say, okay, it's energy inefficient, but also like it creates a very great impact on the biodiversity. It also creates a great impact on human beings, like the human health. And then we have the science. Because I think there is the same example with the noise pollution. Because water pollution, air pollution is like very obvious things. Like as results of air pollution on humans directly, and with water I think the same. But with noise pollution, which was actually recognized as a pollutant and as a problem much longer before the light pollution, which is electrical pollutant too, and I don't understand, it's still not clear for me, why when they recognize the noise pollution, they didn't recognize light pollution as a problem, because the reasons of the recognizing noise pollution as a pollutant actually was research on environment. So we have the same nowadays research how artificial light at night impacts the biodiversity. So for me, it's a perfect reason to make law on that, because it was exactly the same we made law on the noise pollution.
So what I want to throw something in here, because I'm listening to John, and it's supposed to be his turn, but I pointed at myself because I just want to interject, because I think the timing is right here for this question. So we can make a moral case for light pollution. Okay, we might be able to make an ethical case for it. Okay, the legal case is kind of hard. That's a harder situation to where and that's your specialty. But with sound, we have decibels. We can measure sound, right? We know like a low sound versus a high sound. This many decibels mean we have to change something. We have to fix something. We have to put up barriers on highways, whatever it is, right? With light pollution, we don't have a metric. We don't have a scale. And I think the legal argument is going to require some sort of base case with a measurement. You said you're not working that in your work. How are you then making the case for a legal or laws surrounding light pollution? And what are the barriers to this legislation, if not measurement?
First, I didn't say that I didn't completely use the measurement.
Okay.
I just don't know how it should be done because of the lack of the engineering knowledge. I think it's quite obvious. But I think one of the main problems which we have if we go to making the law is the maximum and the minimum amount of light. Because we have minimum and maximum parameters for everything, like, I don't know, water pollutants, air pollutants, even noise. But if we have a problem with measurement of light, which I heard not only here, but before from other scientists, of course, I was thinking the second thing is how we will figure out the minimum and the maximum amount of light. Because per place, like every local community will have different requirements for this light. So I was thinking from the legal perspective and the measurement of light, we should just create the maximum level of light, which would be an average. Like I saw some biological research on the impacts of different spectrum and the levels of light. So maybe we can find like the most average, which has the less amount of impact for humans and more or less species. And we can set it as a maximum amount and don't create the minimum amount of light. So when we make regulations in the different countries, we can choose the different spectrum, but there we will set the maximum on the international level or something. Yeah, with measurements, it's really difficult. I really don't understand how this can work, actually.
Yes, exactly. Because at what scale? At what scale are we measuring? Are we standing on top of a hill? Yeah, and who's doing it? Yes. Yeah. And who's actually bringing the complaint? Mm-hmm. And where's it coming from? Because if I stand on the top of a hill and I look around, there's a town over there and there's a village over there, and I can see that light coming on. But okay, we can measure that, but what happens? Do you then take a legal case out against the entire township to say you are letting too much light go into the sky? It's easy if you know, I was talking to people in my family, and they were complaining about the garage that was across the street from them, and they'd put some new floodlights up, and inevitably it was absolutely awful. But it was easy because you just stood in their window and you looked outside and you saw where the light was coming from, and you were able to go knock on that man's door and go, if you don't do something about this, we will take you to law. And he did something about it. At that scale, we can do things. We can even do things if a local authority comes in and puts new street lights in, and there's a street light outside your bedroom, and the whole thing about sleep health is another issue which is very, very alive at the moment. And you can turn around to the local authority and say you need to screen that light. It works on that level, but as soon as we get to that, acres, 1,000 acres, 2,000, 5,000 acres of land that is just leaking light into the sky, and it's all owned by different people. I mean, is this? This is a question of, do we think this is going to be some kind of class action? Is it going to have to come in at some kind of corporation level, some kind of local authority, city council level? Well, in which case we've got to put some parameters on those city councils.
Before Yana,
I was thinking about the top.
I just want to jump in on that because there's a difference between trespass and sky glow, and that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like light trespass is addressable, right? And somewhat enforceable. Like you can get it enforced, right? So if somebody the garage across the street, like you can enforce light trespass on people, usually by good neighborliness, and then maybe at the bylaw level with local bylaw officers or something like that. It's the sky glow that's very, very difficult. And you're talking about measurement. Are we measuring vertically? Because vertical lumens create sky glow. Horizontal lumens we really can't live without, right? So the maximums on horizontal might be problematic for us, Yana, because people may want to adjust those for various reasons. The horizontal light level below the light fixture that doesn't create sky glow is different than the wasted light from a light fixture that is emitted vertically out of the light fixture. And that's what's creating the sky glow, is that vertical light that's coming off buildings. And I think Ken said 50% of it is from commercial buildings and 15% of it is from municipal street lighting. So you got 65% coming from commercial and municipal street lighting. So how do we then go from, we got to differentiate, Yana, between horizontal measurements, vertical measurements, and then light trespass versus sky glow. How do we handle all these issues from the legal perspective?
From the legal perspective, and to mitigate the sky glow,
Yes, that's right.
We obviously have to measure the lights which go upwards because we have to mitigate that. But I really cannot go into the of that. I can think about how, in my opinion, we can deal with it on a legal level, though. Because in my opinion, we have to deal it from the urban development. Because as you said, most of it is a public lighting. And the public lighting is created at the level of urban development. So the change of the artificial light at night at the local or even the country level, because the urban planning documents is like layered one onto another, we have to change these urban planning documents. And the urban planning legislation and the environmental law, which influence the urban planning from the highest level to the local levels. And at that point, we have to state which light, for example, has to being switched off at a certain time, like we have a crop flu on certain areas. Like we can put on law that we have to completely prohibit the lighting in the national parks, and several countries did that already. And how we can enforce it, if we cross in that country through the national park and we will see the light after the not allowed time, we can make a complaint on that. So this is how we can, but we have to have that regulations. And it's again not about the measurements because I really cannot answer that question.
John, I want to ask you a quick question here. Does the SLL have maximum light level requirements for outdoor street lighting? I know that I'm not sure. I know the IES is working on it, or they have it in RP24 or something like that. Does the SLL have anything on this in the UK?
Well, it's not so much with the Society of Light and Lighting, but it's because historically they have not been the guardians of exterior lighting. That has come from the ILP, the Institution of Lighting Professionals, which is the body for street lighting, and because of that they kind of own, in inverted commas, exterior lighting and what we do with it. So the document that we would all refer to here on obtrusive light would be an ILP document. And yes, there will be maximum levels set. There are different environmental zones. So you'll have obviously you'll have a city centre, but you'll then have a dark sky zone. So they take those right the way out. I live in an area which, I mean, we've got dark sky zones around us, but we do have a lot of rural landscape, which if someone comes to you and says, will you do me an exterior lighting scheme? There are times when you just go, I wouldn't bother if I were you, because we're never going to get it through planning, through the planning system. So you know, we've got a pretty robust system in the UK. What we haven't got is a robust inspectorate to go back out when when these things are done. And that's our biggest problem. Yana, can I just in terms of the what should we call it, if you like, the kickback against trying to legislate things like light pollution? I'm sure this happens in every urban centre, every municipal centre. Whenever there is violent crime against a person, and that person is usually a woman, within the day there will be headlines calling for more street lighting, even though we have no evidence. There is no proof that the street lighting levels have anything to do with this. It will be a knee-jerk. So the police will call for more street lighting. The local authorities will say, we'll have to see what we can do. And everybody will go to the government and say, we've got to have more lighting because these horrible things keep happening. And that works absolutely contrary to everything that we're saying. And I wonder if you've experienced that in your work more broadly. Is there anywhere in the world where they go, we know that high levels of street lighting don't make any difference to violent crime?
The good example is the UK, actually, but not at the government level. But you have a lot of research, which I think quite recent, and during Corona they made it, like 2020, 2021. There is a lot of research done on a fear of crime and the increased or low level of artificial light at night. And those research show directly, first, there is no correlation between the amount of artificial light at night and the crime. Because I think there was one of the examples that they made a renovation of the train station. I think it was in Australia. It was another research. And it actually increased the amount of crime. And the research in the UK shows that nothing has changed, actually, if you will have less or more lights. Can we show this research to prove that we are wrong, actually? That they are wrong, that it's just decreased the fear of crime, right? Not the crime level, but the fear of crime. That is another thing.
Well, I think, you know, the idea, I call him, I have a new name for him, John, and we're going to talk more about this guy on the next show we do. His name is Johnny Safety Strawman, okay? And Johnny Strawman, Mr. Safety, okay? He doesn't have to back up his arguments, okay? Mr. Safety Man doesn't have to provide proof, okay? Mr. Safety Man just has to use the word safety, and Mr. Strawman shuts down all other dialogue and all other talk about it from people who are doing hard research, okay? So those folks like Yana, who are actually investigating this, and the people that put out the UK study on crime, we saw that, John, on another show where they talked about there's different kinds of crime, right? And vagrancy, burglary, violent crime, all these sorts of things. And so Johnny Strawman wins every argument with his false axiomatic presupposition, which is that more light equals more safety. Now, of course, the cops are going to agree with this, but there's a failed dynamic here. When a police officer approaches your car, when you get pulled over for speeding, John, down your country roads in your C-Class Mercedes, the police officer walks up to your door and he shines a flashlight into your face, right? At night, right? What that does is create a one-way dynamic where the police officer can see you, but you can't see the police officer. So immediately you're scared. You're not scared, but you're on alert and you're thinking, okay, I better not do anything stupid, move fast or anything like that because I can't see who's looking at me. When you have massive street lighting, the criminals and the police can see one another equally. Okay? And so this idea that the cops always want more light, what I think they're actually saying is we would like to be able to see those who are committing crimes without them having the same clarity back towards us. And I don't think it translates well into high uniformity, high Kelvin temperature outdoor street lighting where everybody can see everyone equally. I think it removes the advantage that the police are calling for when they're calling for more light. You understand what I'm saying, Yana? And so how do we defeat Mr. Strawman? How do we defeat Johnny Strawman in his safety argument? It's so difficult. It's very, very difficult to overcome him.
But cannot we use just like lighting detectors? So we have like, for example, dimmed lights or a complete switch off, but when people are coming, they're like turning on. So, and we are both kind of at the same position.
Yes.
So we're saving our dark skies, and at the same time we provide them with their safety levels they need. Not always. This is like the whole point I'm having, and I think it's very real.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot completely switch off the lights.
Agreed.
So we have to create these balance detectors. It's more about creating the balance.
You know, John, we've been advocating, and I've been advocating for a long time, that the number one business case for network lighting controls is with municipal street lighting. Like that is the absolute best place for a host of reasons. But nobody in the United States or Canada, I believe, is really studying that application. They're obsessed with the interior environment. And I don't know what's going on in the UK with respect to that. But Yana, you're absolutely right. The number one place to experiment with these network lighting control sensors, detection, motion sensing, all these other arguments, and then dimming and tuning. And I mean, you could run all manner of different types of experiments on crime to get rid of vagrancy using network lighting controls on municipal street lighting, check different streets against each other, measure them year on year based on light levels, on safety. There's so many different applications, Yana. I think we need the legal case from you, people like the work you're doing first. And then the experimentation will start.
I have a comment on that about the lighting control system. Recently, I investigated the wind energy turbines. You know, like these wind energy turbines, which are installing across the Europe. And one of the biggest problems with these lighting turbines is actually annoying red lights on them. So they are located in the rural areas, but the lights which are installed on them are red or very, very white, because the wind turbines need the lighting to be detected by the airplanes. So it's for the airplane safety, because the safety always there goes together with artificial light, I guess. It's like two things coming together. But the interesting movement with the wind energy is that there were so many cases across like the Europe against this like wind turbines. Like people don't want them because they're annoying due to noise pollution and due to the light pollution. And what they changed the regulations from the international level to like the national level, and they require in most of the countries lighting control systems. So it detects the airplane from the certain distance close to these wind turbines or the farms. Then they're turning on, and then they're off when the airplane is past. I think this is the best thing we can use also on a local level, like the train station or something. This is a good example, Michael, of changing the regulation.
Yeah. Clearly, just the simple argument that if there's no one to see the light doesn't need to be there. That should be the bottom line. And there is a strange thing. No one ever talks about this. No one ever talks about it. It's not necessarily just the lighting for the people. It's the lighting for the surveillance cameras that then film the street, and the quality of video image that you can get, so you can see when the bad guys turn up in their cars and they get out. They go, look, he's a bad guy. We'll have him. Because in a way, the police don't want us to go out at night. They would much prefer us to stay at home. Because if we all stay at home, there's not going to be no street violence at all. That's all fine.
Not true.
Not true. Well, no, because most violence happens in the home. Yes, that is, we're not going to get rid of it. We're just going to have even more of it. We saw that with our various lockdowns. People staying at home was not necessarily a happy experience for people. But that it's trying to find out where the very core of this argument is. I mean, Michael, you're right. We can do much more with controls. We can do much more with sensors. But it all seems to be that these are little bits and pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and we're picking one piece up and going, oh, lighting control, that might work for us. Where does that go in the puzzle? But we don't know what the puzzle looks like. We don't have the whole picture. We just keep playing around with these little things. And so long as your Johnny Strawman is out there, and Johnny Strawman he's a very busy boy, because it's not only lighting that this guy's involved in. People like you, Yana, are actually trying to create legal cases, and legal precedent in the UK is all we've got, because we do not have a written constitution. We only have the rule of law. So we need law to come to us to tell us what is correct and what is appropriate. And for that we need, because we have a competitive legal system, we need a plaintiff, we need a defendant. So somebody's got to be bad and somebody's got to be offended, and that we need to get them together like this, because we do not seem to have a way of going, maybe we could all sit around the table and agree a legal position which might service everyone.
Well, I think
again,
I think, Yana, you got to get the lighting industry on board. See, the lighting industry has to go from being the defendant to being the plaintiff. You understand what I mean? Or like, that's the key thing here, is industry alignment. Do you, in your research, do you have any support from the lighting industry? Or you have any funding? Is there anybody that you're working with at Signify or any of these great companies in Europe that are involved in the lighting industry? Are they supporting your work, or are they standing aside watching?
Let's say we're working together sometimes. It's like now, currently, I think in the last, normally like a couple of years ago, if you go to the conference related to it, it would be biologists, doctors, all these scientific guys. And it's very difficult for me to consume the information too. But nowadays, when there's an international conference, they also inviting lighting industry guys. Even like the designers, the producers, and like all the people related to the lighting industry. And I think this is the most important part, because I already see a lot of lighting industry people who are actually getting aware of the light pollution, and they're trying to implement certain smart lighting designers when they design lighting for the park, like in their local area somewhere in Poland, because a lot of very active, I think, lighting community, lighting industries in Poland with regard to the dark sky protection. But they don't support me directly, but I work with them.
So I think, John, I think the lighting industry,
I want to get them on board.
Yes. I think the lighting industry needs this, like when I it's the problem. What we've seen with the pandemic, as you mentioned earlier, John, in all this stuff, and Mr. Strawman, Johnny Strawman, and his arguments, is that the lighting industry has to step back and say, yes, we have improved energy efficiency. That is fantastic. That is fantastic. Yep. But we in the rush to do so, we've made these errors. We've forgotten some principles on the way, and we're sorry for that. And we messed up. Okay, like. This is where we go, right? And they just say, look, you saw it with COVID. Like, why can't people just come out and say, you know what, we were wrong. We don't know. We didn't have all the information then. And now this is starting to emerge. And Yana's work legally, we're looking for some legal case law or something for us to be able to know the difference between right and wrong, John. And that's what the moral case is there, the ethical case is there. If we had the legal arguments, we could bring the lighting industry in, and the lighting industry could make a fortune off this. Like, folks, this represents the single biggest boom of the 21st century. And it is the challenge of the 21st century of this industry to turn ourselves, paradigm shift, John, from the lighting industry to an industry that provides electric light to an industry that provides electric light and natural darkness, John.
Hey, you don't have to keep shouting at me, because I'm agreeing with you. there's a company. This is terrible because I cannot remember her name. In one of our previous conversations, we were talking to the social scientist who's based in Berlin, and who she'd looked at lighting in Lyon and lighting in Berlin itself. One project worked, another project didn't work, and what was felt there was it's very, very difficult to say this is the way we should all be doing it. And of course, every time you put a lighting code together or a set of standards, the assumption is that everyone's going to do it. But we have no evidence here. So what was being called for was we need to find a way to do work, and then we need to find discrete projects where we can go in and we can do the proper analysis. We spoke to Russell Foster a few weeks ago, looking at circadian lighting. And the thing that Russell talks about all the time is we've got to get projects on the ground and we've got to be measuring them, because all the time that we're in a laboratory, we're losing time. So yes, we've got to have the lighting industry on board. The lighting industry, I don't think, is in a particularly healthy shape, because most of the time we've got people chasing their tail, they're chasing their targets. They're wondering, whether they're going to make their results at the end of the year. So the idea that you can get manufacturers other than some of the huge companies out there to get involved in proper analysis, it's very difficult. But I think what we need to do is we need to find that sort of white knight character who'll say, I will fund this. Now, maybe that person is the United Nations. Maybe it's the EU. I don't know. It won't be, I tell you, it won't be anybody in the UK. But we need those projects where we can actually go in and measure and we can see what's happening. And it has to be done at scale. So it's not a case of doing a couple of streets, which is what we've been doing now. It's a whole community. So, Yana, sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. I think it's very important to unite the project, because now I see the projects that are done like in the dark sky protection, but I think we have to have a project which will not only include the lighting engineers or like biologists or just lawyers separately. We really have to make like certain projects which will unite some like different people together and make this work to showing all these different aspects which we just discussed, to like go on with this dark sky protection. Because if each group will continue to make the research separately, we will never move on, I think.
Yeah.
Because there is no connection in between each other in the end.
And we need funding, Michael. We've got to someone has got to come up with proper money to be able to do this, because local authorities in the UK are strapped for money. There is no money, and much of Europe is in the same place, and I think much of America is in the same place. That we don't have buckets of money to throw around.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We've got to find it from somewhere.
Yeah, well, you were talking about Nona Schulte-Romer, episode 44, the invisible infrastructure.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
yes,
no problem.
Sorry,
that's episode.
Nona.
Yep, that's episode 44. But it's interesting. The people that are best positioned for this are in the United States. It's Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. PNNL does excellent research in the field. That's an organization that could really tackle this from the practical aspects of picking it, having someone do it in a town. They have the resources. The people are so smart there. They really have the scientists. They understand the lighting industry. They have a whole lighting department. I think PNNL will be a great candidate to take this on.
I think Jim Benya is one of the guys associated with that, isn't he? Over in
Jim Benya is everywhere. Okay, so
Jim is everywhere. I know. Yeah.
Jim is the white knight. Okay, of the lighting industry. He's a massive force in this movement for sure. Yana, let me break it back down here. So here's my concern. Okay, with the legal side, and I think this is a good place to kind of wrap it up. We didn't get into the space stuff too much, but I don't think that's totally on topic, unless you can change my mind on that. But so almost there's a model lighting ordinance out there that exists already. So there's a model lighting ordinance that exists in the United States, okay? And thousands and thousands of counties and municipalities and regions in Canada and the United States already have lighting ordinances for light pollution. The problem is they got to pull these things out and blow the dust off them. Because I don't think anyone's ever read them since they were passed as law. Okay? And so there's already a lot of municipal laws. It's like a Byzantium or a balkanization. They're all different depending on where you are. But there's a lot of laws on the books, and they didn't make a difference. And that's because, I think, for two reasons. One, regulation without enforcement encourages offenders to continue doing what they're doing. So it punishes those who comply. It squeezes the compliers and allows the offenders to go free. How do we avoid the regulation without enforcement trap if we do get laws passed?
This is a really good question, and it's indeed the main problem, the enforcement and implementation of the dark sky protection laws. So in my opinion, if it goes for the local ordinances, which indeed there are a lot of them in the United States specifically, and I think according to my current analysis, I figure out the best way to make this small local regulation work is to create the fines. Like there is one local ordinance in Texas, and it provides a certain amount of artificial light at night at the different zones, and it's quite a good local lighting ordinance. But it also includes the fines. So if people don't comply with these regulations, they will be fined. And I think this is the best motivation, like to have a sanction. If you don't comply with regulations, you can be fined. Another thing is, who is going to control it constantly? Or like, should police do that? Or I can go, if I see that happen, I can go to the local authorities and then I claim the fine for that person.
Light pollution is not a criminal offense, though. We're talking about a civil offense.
No, we can have, well, it's administrative offense, though.
Right. So the bylaw officers would do that enforcement, but here's the issue. I also find that, and maybe John, maybe you can comment on this, from there's a lot of focus on residential, which is a very low percentage of light pollution. Okay? There's an over focus on like my neighbor's lights shining on my lawn. That is a form of light pollution called trespass. But it's
protected by noises in the UK.
Yeah, but the residential participation in sky glow is actually very, very low. And so it's the commercial buildings, it's those buildings, the advertising, the wall packs, the parking lots that are lit up to 80 foot candles at night that are actually contributing to the sky glow. And so I think this legislation should be directed as much as possible at municipalities and commercial and industrial properties.
But I think it's again
Yana, sorry. Carry on.
Yeah, I will be really quickly. So I think it's not for the local ordinances, it's for change the national legislation. So to make the change of and mitigate the commercial lighting, because local ordinances normally related to the very small local area, which doesn't have that much in it. But if you have the national level or I don't know, state level in the case
I think the provincial level in Canada,
better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the regional division of the country, it may work better because at that point we will have but again, we have to find the enforcement body who is going to check this. We can say we have to turn off the lighting. In Belgium, it's one of the worst, in my opinion, case of the artificial light at night from the commercial property. They have the artificial light at night on at night, always, everywhere. In every store, every H&M, whatever it is, it's on at night from 5 o'clock in the evening and the whole night on. And I don't understand why it's not banned. It's it has zero need, in my opinion. And if we change it in the regional level, the stores, the owners of the stores are obligatory or it's mandatory to switch off the lights, it will already make a change because otherwise they can be fined. And here, the police who is circulating around the city in the evening can see it and say, yeah, these guys have lights. Or I can take a picture and send it to the police department to say, these guys are doing bad things.
I think I'd be interested in somebody doing this test, but I think probably the brightest area of England is the square mile of the City of London, and no one lives there.
Mm.
You know, it is almost purely commerce, because it's where all the banks are. You know, and yet it is so bright when you go through there at night.
Mm.
We have groups like the Good Law Project, and I think one of the great things is that anyone in this country, anyone can take anyone else to court, provided there is actually a case to answer. So it could well be that, you know, if I'm walking down Cheapside and I'm going, it's 11 o'clock at night. There's only me here, and yet I can sit and I can read my paper.
Mm-hmm.
This is ludicrous. And then what I need someone like the Good Law Project, and I can contact them and say, I've got one for you. This is wrong. We need to be able to build a case so that we can get these people to turn their lights off. But I'd like to go a little bit further, Yana, because I think that lighting standards, those codes that we've got, are probably all too bright. They're all based on. Yeah, you know, I mean, there's you know, this stuff has been there, and they've only been getting brighter. So, is there a case to be made to say the standards are wrong? We want a revision of the standards, and we want a mass reduction on lighting in our streets, and certainly on our buildings. The laws as we currently have them are just not fit for purpose.
Going back to the legal case, to make the legal case, you have to have law. And this is the vicious circle you cannot really break, right? So to claim something, you have to have regulations on which basis you can claim it. The second thing I want to know, how to change the standards. I think we have a lot of cases, most of them are criminal cases, and they were road lighting. We have a lot of data on the car accidents, which are directly related to the bad road lighting. And I think this is one of the best ways to change the European Union roads standards, because now it requires like the unified and very high lighting installations, which are very dangerous for the drivers because they cannot see out of the road because it's very dark and it's very bright on the roads. But this is the current requirement of the European Union. And using the data of the existing car accidents, maybe it can change. It can like propose the change of the standards, saying that, guys, this is bad because the drivers, they physically cannot see like pedestrians because of these lighting installations.
Well, that's actually proven. Okay, so we interviewed a guy earlier on the show that talked about how, because of remember we talked about contrast. So the key to visual acuity at night is actually contrast, right? It's they're having a party and I can see everything going on in the party out on a dark street, and they can't see me looking at their party, right? So contrast creates visual acuity at night. So you can see the bright spot as long as you're in the dark spot. If you're in an equally bright spot, your visual acuity goes down. If you're in a brighter spot, your visual acuity goes down further because you can't see a long way. This is already proven with crosswalks and all sorts of different things. The issue, as I see it, why would not, like, the Environmental Protection Agency in America or the Ministry of the Environment in Canada or one of these bodies pass a law declaring that wasted electric light is actually hazardous waste? So that would be an interesting angle on this, to like have the EPA come out and say, you know what, this is a form, wasted electric light at night is a form of hazardous waste, and have the regulations come from that side rather than from the min-max levels. Is that something that you guys are working on, Yana? Is that ever proposed that it become from the environmental agencies?
I think I never saw it, and I never thought about artificial light at night as a form of waste. Because I think of the legal definition of waste. I think it would be very difficult to put artificial light at night as a waste, because we can say that lighting bulb is a waste, like the used lighting bulb. but how we can consider, according to the current legal definition of waste, that existing artificial light at night is waste. So it's really difficult from perspective. It's easier to make it as a pollutant and use the like polluting regulations or environmental protection regulations, not the waste regulations. But it's in my opinion. But I'm going to have a look because it's a really good idea. I'm going to read it.
There is a parallel with that. There's a parallel with that currently going on in the UK, in that we have water companies who have massively underinvested in the infrastructure. We are losing billions of gallons of water a year, while the chief executives are taking an awful lot of money, and so do shareholders. And this is now reached a stage where it is coming into the popular consciousness, mainly because the area where I live has now declared itself, we're in a drought. The whole of the southwest of England is in a drought. At the same time, billions of gallons of water are being lost because the system is not being maintained. So the question is being asked in regards water, why are we allowing people to throw this stuff away? And inefficient lighting at night is the same thing.
Bingo.
It's not water, but it's carbon, it's energy, it's things that have value, and we throw. It's like taking a brand new refrigerator and putting it in the dump.
Yeah,
it's not. It's not waste until you go, I've decided it's waste because I don't want it.
Yeah, declare it.
And I think, yeah. So Yana, I think our definition of what waste is, it needs to change in these times.
Yes.
That's always said the right
thing.
And
the perspective was discussed. Yeah, like the waste from that perspective as a waste, we can say that artificial light at night or light pollution is wasted energy. But then it goes to, again, energy efficiency, and we don't pay attention to the environmental impact, which is bad. This is why I think that we should be focused more on the light as a pollutant, because it creates more and more strict regulations related to the environmental protection. And they will also include energy efficiency, like CO2 emissions. They're broader and more strict.
I think that
pollutant is better than waste at that point.
I think declaring it as a hazardous waste is interesting because it is hazardous. It's hazardous to wildlife. It's hazardous to nocturnal species. I think that's an interesting angle to look at this as a hazardous waste. So wasted water, is it hazardous waste? I don't know if it floods something maybe, or I don't know how that was.
But waste is a resource.
So exactly. So, but here's the point. So there's a stretch of highway. This is what I'd love to do. And we're coming up on an hour, if you guys can believe it. It's been an hour we've talked. There's a stretch of highway north of Toronto on a highway called the 404, and it is right next to an airport. Okay, and they've been doing construction on that highway for they always do construction on that highway all the time. It's always under construction. But anyway, what they've put in there is they had these, I believe they had these old lights for the construction, and the pilots landing the planes were complaining they couldn't see the runway because of the glare at night. Okay, because there's so much glare. So what they actually installed, because of the pilots, what you would call a dark sky friendly or dark sky compliant lighting system for a stretch of about 3 kilometers on the highway. I would love to see the statistics if there are more or less accidents on that stretch of highway. Because you know what happens is when you drive into that stretch, immediately you notice that the light level goes down, like the general light level in the area goes down, but there's no loss of visual acuity because the road is lit up, only the road. Right, so the road in front of you is lit up, and so there isn't this loss of visual acuity. And these lights are on basic wooden poles set in a piece of concrete. They move it back and forth. They're on cables. They move them back and forth as they're expanding and repairing the highway, and they have these lights sitting there for about 3 kilometers. If we were able, if someone could commission a study and say, okay, let's look at the accidents. Let's look at the car accidents on the 404 and see how many happen here versus how many happen down there, and see if there's a difference between the level of car accidents. Maybe it'll turn out that the dark skies friendly system doesn't perform as well. I don't think so, though. I think it may turn out that while people will say that it feels darker, they can actually see better because of that contrast effect that I was talking about, where the area in front of you is brighter than where you are. I think that's such a key application of light. Yes, John.
this is not really about lighting, but it's exactly what you've just mentioned. I'm a cyclist. It's what I do. I just enjoy getting out on my bike and going for a ride in the country lanes. There we have some research that because there's a certain political movement in this country that is trying to rubbish cyclists. That we're the bad guys. But the research says that if a motorist sees a cyclist wearing a helmet, that motorist will take more risks with that cyclist than if the cyclist is not wearing a helmet. If a cyclist is dressed up in lycra, as in this is obviously someone who knows what they're doing, motorists will take more risks around that person than if they're just wearing t-shirt and jeans. So what you're saying, Michael, is that if you put less light into a place, it suggests more vulnerability, and it suggests that people have to take more care. The more light you make, the more safe you make it, the less care people need to make, and that's a terrible thing. I mean, that's a health thing because people end up in hospital.
Yana,
so there's another cost.
We've come up on an hour. We got to have some courtesy for the guests here. Do you have any
Sorry,
final?
Yana.
Do you have any final thoughts?
Fine.
I agree with you, John.
I really enjoyed it. I can go on.
Yeah. Any final thoughts for the Restoring Darkness listeners? I think we're probably going to have you on again because we didn't even get to the space stuff. So, any final thoughts?
Okay, that sounds like fun. I'm always up to it. I think the final thoughts, which I can, we definitely should start developing the law on dark sky protection, and this law should belong to environmental protection. Definitely, because of the strict implication of it and the very great awareness of the environmental issue and sustainability nowadays. So we have to use this hype, way bad word, but the hype of the sustainable development and to put the artificial light at night there and make the law on that. But I will definitely have a look from the perspective of the hazardous waste. It's a really interesting thought there. I never thought about it. I always think about the pollutant. It is.
Well, we're going to say goodbye to Yana Yakushina and her cat and John Bullock over in the UK. And we're going to thank all you listeners who right now are going to go to restoringdarkness.com and you're going to click merch and you're going to buy this beautiful swanky merch. That's right. Hoodies, t-shirts, hats, we got it all there for you folks. But if you made it all the way to the end, I know sometimes we try to keep it 45 minutes, but you know how it is, guys. We're just rolling here. So thank you for listening. Take care for now.
Look no further for dark sky-friendly products than Evluma. Since its first product launch, Evluma has carried one or more International Dark Sky Association certified models. If your customer cares about light pollution, suggest the OmniMax with shielding or the AreaMax with full cutoff to reduce uplight and glare. Evluma, illuminating the pursuit of darkness.